Very good morning, dear children. Welcome back. This video is for class 10th science, chapter number 9, heredity and evolution, and this is lecture number 1 of chapter number 9. In today's lecture, we will see the introduction to heredity, variations and its types, accumulation of variations, and genetics, and some important terms related to genetics. So let us begin with our first topic, that is heredity. Heredity. Before knowing about heredity, I would like to tell you that in previous chapter we have studied how organisms reproduce. And in that we have seen that while reproduction, there can be two methods for the reproduction. One asexual, another can be sexual one. And during both these, what happens that new offsprings are generated. In asexual method, only one parent is involved. In sexual method, two parents are involved. And here, DNA copying, which is the basic process of reproduction in asexual reproduction method as well, when the DNA copy is being created, then that is also not exactly the same. So in this asexual reproduction also, there can be some minor changes or some inaccuracies in DNA copying. And as we know that in sexual reproduction, two different parents, one male and female, are required to reproduce. Here, two different cells or gametes, they fuse together to give one birth to an offspring. So, in this, there are variations, changes occurring in the combined zygote which is formed. So, heredity is basically all about the characteristics, the traits. So, heredity can be the characteristics, for example, the complexion, eye color, hair color, height. All these are the characteristics of an individual, which are called as traits. And these traits, when these are transmitted from parent to offsprings, then this transmission of traits from parents to offsprings is called heredity. So basically heredity is transmission of characteristics of parent to the child or the offspring. So we can say that inheritance or the transmission of characters from one generation to another. Here, this is a long process, and the formation of a new individual is basically done by copying the DNA. DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, which is the blueprint of an individual. Here, if the asexual reproduction is used, then there are chances of inaccuracy in copying the DNA. Then there will be minor variations or changes in the DNA. And if the sexual reproduction happens where a sperm and ovum, they fuse together to form a zygote, after fertilization the zygote is formed, and this zygote leads to the variations or the transmission of traits from one generation to another. So basically, it is the zygote which is transmitting the parental characteristics to a child. As in about variations, we have studied in the previous chapter as well, but I would like to tell you that the differences in the traits or characters among the individual of a species are called variations. So, variations are the changes or the difference in the characteristics of organisms or individuals of the same species. Let us see how the variations occur in species. So here we have a couple, father and mother. Father is having brown straight hair and a fair complexion, whereas the mother is having curly and black hair, fair complexion. And here if we try to see the son and the daughter of theirs, which are the next generation of these couples, here we can see that son is having the black straight hair, whereas the girl, the daughter child, is having the brown curly hair. So here there is a mix of the characteristics of the male and the female. So here heredity or the transmission of different characteristics of parents have been transferred to the son and the daughter. So here we can easily see that which kind of changes has occurred while copying the DNA for forming the individuals of next generation of the same species. So this is called variation or the changes in a family. So this is how during reproduction, when the zygote is fertilized or the individuals are formed, that time, which is the here the zygote formation is happening at the same time. What happens? There are variations, changes occurring in the DNA copying. So, because of that, the different characteristics or characteristics of the parents will be transferred, but there can be changes in the new generation. So, here we see the variation in a family. This was all about the sexual reproduction, but in asexual reproduction, the same thing happens. For example, if one bacteria is there, it has given birth to two bacteria which are identical to it. But still, while doing the copy of DNA, creating a copy of DNA, there can be some inaccuracy or some error which can happen while copying the DNA. So variations can be there in the individuals formed. And further, these variations will keep on changing when further these cells or the bacteria will divide or give birth to the new bacteria. Now, just summarize the causes of variations in DNA. So, first will be the reshuffling of genes, inaccuracy in DNA copying, and there can be some environmental factors which can affect the variations or the characteristics of an individual. Although we have discussed, but still, here we can talk of the importance of variation, the how variations are important for individuals. So we know that variations are the changes occurring in the DNA of an individual which is formed. So depending upon the nature of variations, different individuals will have different kinds of advantages. For example, bacteria, it if there are variations occurring in the bacteria, it can withstand with or it can have a better survival in the different or hard circumstances. For example, if the changes are occurring or variations are occurring in such a way that it makes it more heat resistant, then it will be able to survive in the very much high temperature as well. And the main advantage of the variation or the importance of variation is that it increases the chances of the individual survival in a changing environment, or it makes the individual adaptive to the changes in the environment. Traits, the characteristics, can be inherited or acquired. Inherited traits are the characteristics which are transmitted from parents to offsprings. So they will be transmitted from one generation to another generation of the same species. Acquired characteristics are the one which gets developed during the lifetime of an individual. So they will be called as acquired traits. Now let us talk about the types of variations. That changes or the variations which occur, they can be mainly variations. Variations are having two main categories. First, in which we can divide variations into heritable or non-heritable variations. Heritable means which are coming because of the heredity or the transmission of characteristics from one generation to another, and non-heritable which are not transferred from one generation to another. These are the factors, the environmental factors that affect the life of an individual. The second category is continuous variations and discontinuous variations. So now let us discuss them one by one. First is heritable variations. So the differences or the variations inherited by the combination of two different parents is called hereditary or heritable variations. For example, the type of blood or blood group, hair color, skin color, eye color, and height. Second is non-heritable or environmental variation. So these are the influences by the environment or external appearance changes. These environmental variations come because of the differences in light, water, soil, and nutrients. These cannot be passed to the next generation. So that is why they are also called as non-heritable or environmental variations. In another category, we have the continuous and discontinuous variations. So continuous variations, the type of variation in which individuals can be arranged in an ascending order. That means once the changes come in one generation or the individuals, then when these individuals will further reproduce, these changes will keep on transferring from one generation to another, and that's how these are called as continuous variations. For example, let us take the height as the major concern. If we take if we measure the height of all the students of a particular age group, let's say 12 years age, let's say we measure the height of 15 students of the same age group, then while measuring the height we will find that in the same age group we will have different heights. They will have from small to tall, and most of the students will have the average height out of them. So this shows that height is a continuous variation. That height is a continuous variation. It keeps on transferring from one person to another, from one generation to another. Then there can be many, for example, the color of the skin, that also keeps on transferring from one parent to another or from parent to the offsprings. Then intelligence. Then we can have the production of milk that is done by the mammals. That is also one characteristic which is continuous in nature, and that will be transferred from parents to the offsprings. Another is discontinuous variation. So as the name itself suggests, discontinuation will be there. That means it is possible that some of the features from parent to offspring has gone, but they are not going to the second generation. Let's say we have parents, their offspring, which will be the first generation, and then their offsprings, they will be at second generation. So some of the characteristics are such a way that they are not transferred to the first one, and still, because here they were not dominant, so here they do not play any role, but the second one, in the second generation, they become dominant. So here there is a gap of variations or changes occurring, or we can say that discontinuous variations are the one in which no gradation. That means that changes will not keep on happening in the generations to happen. For example, the shape of a seed of pea plant. So that shape of that seed will not change. It will be either round or wrinkled. So it will remain round or wrinkled in all the generations. Our next topic is accumulation of variation. Accumulation means collection of variations. So let us see how accumulation of variation happens. So to understand the accumulation of variations, let us have one example. Because we know that during the process of reproduction, the traits are inherited from parents to the offsprings. And the new individuals, they are the combined they are having the combined features. They can have some variations, or they will also have some of the characteristics of their parent. So here variations start occurring in the species. These variations, they get accumulated over the successive generations, and this increase the frequency of specific variations as we move on further in a generation. And because of all these things, diversity occurs, and this diversity will be less in case of asexual because there are only some subtle variations are there. But in sexual reproduction, there are chances of being or having more variations. So let us see that this is one bacteria. A bacterium reproduces and gives rise to the offsprings. Now, here we can see that the offsprings or the daughter bacteria, they show variations which allow it to withstand heat, or it makes it live in higher temperatures or extreme temperature conditions. So here we can see that the new daughter bacteria are having some of the characteristics from their parents, and they can also have some error occurred in copying the DNA. So there can be some variations. So here we can see that although these two are similar ones, but still here we can see that the basic cell structure remains the same. It is having the same body structure or the body makeup, organism makeup. It is similar, but here these different colors are showing, are representing the variations occurred from the parent bacteria to the daughter bacteria. Now here, when these two will become parents and they will give birth to new offsprings or new bacteria, then also some of the characteristics will remain the same, whereas some can further variate. So here we can see that when this bacteria, which was having some of the variations or more variations than this, has produced the bacteria which are having more numbers of variations in them, and this bacteria has made one unique bacteria. So, and this one is quite similar to it. So this says that during these successive generations, the variations keeps on accumulating in the species, and hence variations, they are making the better survival of the individuals. So here this bacteria will have some unique features. There can be some similar bacteria which will have the characteristics inherited from the parents or from the first generation. So these variations, they create diversity in these same species. Now let us have our next topic, that is genetics and some important terms. So genetics is the branch of biology that deals with the heredity and variations. And some further important terms are chromosome, genes, DNA. So here chromosome. Chromosome, we have discussed about it in the previous chapter as well. That was how do organisms reproduce. In that chapter we have talked a lot about chromosomes, genes and DNA. So we know chromosome is a thread-like structure which is present inside the nucleus of a cell, and along with the chromosomes DNAs are present in that. DNAs carry the genes. So DNA is a long strand which is having many of the genes present in them. And so we can say gene is a part of DNA. One gene represents one characteristic, and the DNA carries many characteristics or many genes in it. So a gene is a relatively short length DNA that codes for a protein or that makes up one characteristics of the individual. These genes are located on the chromosomes and they control various traits of an organism. Genes are the basic units of inheritance that are capable of determining the development of a special characteristics of an organism. And genes are only responsible for transferring the traits from parents to their offsprings during reproduction. Genes are represented by letter and they always work in pair. For example, if we talk about the height of one individual, then height, or if we say that tallness is one characteristic. Now, tallness is controlled by the genes only, which a particular kind of gene will control the tallness of the individual. Now letter T, I told you the letters are used to represent it. So capital T will be used for the representation of tallness, and small t will be used to show the tallness, or in short dwarfness. So genes that control the same characteristics of an organism. They can be, for example, if we take the gene of the tallness, then gene can be dominant or recessive. Dominant gene decides the appearance of an organism irrespective of the any other gene present, whereas the recessive gene decides the appearance of an organism only in the presence of another similar kind of or identical gene. Dominant gene is represented by capital letter and recessive gene is represented by small letter. So here in the same example we have seen that the tallness, which is one characteristics of an individual, so we can say in that if we write the gene as T, so if one gene is represented as this, then this is the dominant one and this is the recessive gene, which shows the dwarfness of the individual. So children, this is it for today's lecture. We will continue in this next lecture and we will understand the Mendel's contribution in the genetics. So let us see the today's homework now. As today's homework, first question of yours is, what are the causes of variations? Question number 2 is, why do organisms reproducing sexually show high diversity? Question number 3 is, if a trait A exists in 10% of a population of an asexually reproducing species and a trait B exists in 60% of the same population, which trait is likely to have arisen earlier? Question number 4 is, how does the creation of Variations in a species promote survival. So, children, do these 4 questions in your fair notebook as today's homework. I'll see you all in lecture number 2 of the same chapter. Till then, take care and goodbye.